Hey, what's going on, everybody? Good evening, and this is my UFC Wichita Post Fight reaction video. So let's just get right into it. The card just ended like about 6 hours ago. You know, thank God for that new ESPN Plus start time of 5 p.m. Pacific. So the main card was over by around 8:30, which is really good timing. Even though I'm doing this reaction video 6 hours after the fact, I've just been up late now. So, anyways, let's just jump right into it. As I was saying, in the main event, Junior Dos Santos defeated Derek the Black Beast Lewis via stoppage in the second round. Um, this was a pretty wild fight for as long as it lasted. There was an instance where Derek Lewis was hurt to the solar plexus by a spinning back kick by Junior Dos Santos, and Dos Santos carefully waded in to finish him off and almost caught a Hail Mary right hand, a la Scott Smith and Pete Sell from many years back. If you've never seen that fight, Google it, look it up on Fight Pass. It's insane. Um, and that was he weathered the storm. Both guys cracked each other with pretty hard shots. It was a really wild fight. Derek Lewis, was throwing wild flying kicks and stuff like that. He'd been doing that for his last few fights. Looked like he was trying to test it out. He's deceptively athletic for a guy that is just a power puncher that he really doesn't do anything else. His cardio looked fine for the most part. I think the only reason why he kind of gassed a little bit was, get kicked in the solar plexus. That'll change. That'll change your cardio. Um, so moving forward, this would be interesting to see how this shakes out in the heavyweight title picture because Derek Lewis, was coming off a heavyweight title shot against Daniel Cormier, and now he just dropped his second bout in a row. Junior Dos Santos has now quietly snuck up on a three-fight winning streak, beating Blagoy Ivanov and Tai Tuivasa prior to tonight. I think this fight was the one that really signified that Junior Dos Santos was back, you know, because with all due respect to Tai Tuivasa and even Blagoy Ivanov, who was a former champion of another organization, Junior Dos Santos was starting. People were starting to question if he was declining. Was he still up to championship level, which I find a little interesting to say because the guy has only 5 losses total in his career, 4 of them in the UFC, and 2 of those losses were to the same guy, which is Cain Velasquez. Um, and the other one was the knockout loss to Alistair Overeem. He's never lost back-to-back bouts in the UFC, so it's kind of interesting that this was a fork in the road fight for him to see if he was going to remain in the upper echelon of the heavyweight division. And I think he's positioned himself rightfully so to be in line for a title shot should whoever's above him not get the call, which is currently, I believe, Stipe Miocic, the former champ, and Francis Ngannou. And that's what really makes things interesting now, is because the heavyweight champion DC is unavailable, and according to UFC President Dana White, when he does come back from injury or just the sabbatical he's taking, he's healing up, he's gonna fight Brock Lesnar. And when that idea was initially proposed sometime last year, well, actually, it was actually proposed after Daniel Cormier beat Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight championship back in July. Um, Daniel Cormier was slated to get Brock Lesnar, and at the time, to me, it made sense. Maybe not from the merit perspective, but it made sense just from the box office draw that Brock Lesnar was. And to be quite frank, at the time, the heavyweight division kind of was lacking viable contenders uh, because of Stipe Miocic. He had just beaten Francis Ngannou. He had just beaten Junior Dos Santos. He had just beaten Alistair Overeem, and those guys, as long as Stipe was champion, I couldn't see them getting their rematch right away, at least not, after one fight or two. So I thought that Brock Lesnar was a good little, you know, fill-in gap fight to keep Daniel Cormier busy with a big pay-per-view money fight. But the thing was, it didn't happen right away. We thought it was going to happen at Madison Square Garden, which ended up being the fight that Derek Lewis took on short notice at UFC 230, and he lost that. So essentially, between Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic, the top of the heavyweight division had gotten cleaned out. Fabricio Verdun got suspended; he's not fighting anymore, and other names and legends just left the division and went to other promotions. So the Brock Lesnar fight not taking place at the time was supposed to take place. Now you fast forward, it's amazing how things fast move in MMA. Now I don't see it possibly happening, or at least not in a sensible way. It makes less sense now because now the division was able to breathe. The division was able to figure itself out. Francis Ngannou came back with 2 straight victories. He knocked out Curtis Blades and the returning Cain Velasquez in consecutive order. So he positioned himself to get a title shot, particularly considering who the champion is in relation to the last person he just beat. Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier are best friends. There's a natural storyline there. And now you have Junior Dos Santos putting himself right back in that mix with this latest win because now he has the pedigree. He's the former champ. And the only person that has beaten him recently lost the title, Stipe Miocic, and the other guy who has beaten him, Cain Velasquez, just lost to Francis Ngannou. And so that kind of leaves us with they should fight each other. They were supposed to fight each other sometime last year. It didn't come to fruition because JDS, through I believe what he claimed was a tainted supplement, got suspended by USADA and then was absolved of that, or at least they reduced suspension, something of the nature. I forget the details, pardon me. So now I think it would be the right time to run that back. Or, which I actually think makes even more sense if we're really trying to book these things in a just manner, JDS should fight Brock Lesnar. If Brock Lesnar really is as adamant about coming to the UFC as Dana White says he is, I think that's the right fight to make. It makes sense. The two have a history because they both coached The Ultimate Fighter many moons ago. The Ultimate Fighter Season 13. They were supposed to fight at a pay-per-view, UFC 131, I believe, in Vancouver, of all places. Shane Carwin, if you remember that name, ended up the one replacing Brock Lesnar, and JDS dispatched him. I mean, it was a 3-round beatdown, but it was a stunning development. So I think JDS would want that fight against Brock Lesnar. I think he could win that fight against Brock Lesnar, and for Brock Lesnar would be a good, reintroduction back into the UFC. I mean, he beat Mark Hunt at UFC 200, but then quickly got suspended by USADA for popping. So there's that. So essentially, he hasn't won in like 6 or 7 years on the record. So it'll be interesting moving forward how the heavyweight division, as I said, will shake out. Moving right along in the co-main event, Elizu, I'm sorry if I butchered that. Zaleski Dos Santos defeated Curtis Millender via submission with a rear naked choke about 2.5 minutes in the first round. This was a great showcase fight in the co-main event. Nice card placement to put together two guys on pronounced winning streaks. To see who would, make that crossover into possibly the top 10 of the division. Zaleski, I feel, even though Zaleski was the only one ranked, it's just to show you just how deep welterweight is getting. He's ranked, and he is yet to even face anybody of note that's a name in the division. And he was, reeling off big highlight finishes, and so that's why he was paired up with Millender, and I felt the winner of this fight was going to get like a bigger name, somebody that they could really put a stamp on their resume for. And he passed his test with flying colors. I mean, he showed his well-roundedness, took down Millender, got the mount on him, and worked through to a submission and got the stoppage, um, which I thought was very helpful for him because up until this point, he was getting paid this just, oh, he's just a striker, he's just a finisher at the feet. Maybe if you grapple him, it might be a different result. It's not. He showed really good well-roundedness. He spoke very well on the mic to make his intentions known. I think he's due for a big fight now. And I feel that fight should be Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who's fighting in a couple of weeks in Nashville. In a couple of weeks, it's sometime soon. He's fighting former lightweight champ Anthony Pettis in the main event. So I think it should be Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, win or lose, particularly if it's a win, because I don't think Anthony Pettis is staying at welterweight. I think the fight was just a one-off that the UFC booked just to fill a main card, which was fine. But now it's that time. You gotta help these prospects be put in spotlights to shine, so that way they can become household names themselves. And I think a matchup against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson would do just that. Or possibly, maybe he gets Ben Askren. But I think Ben Askren has higher aspirations. He's looking up, not behind. Zaleski's looking up. So also a possibility with Robbie Lawler, but since Zaleski's coming off a win, I mean, I know Robbie Lawler lost, but he did look good in that fight. I thought that might make sense too. Uh, but I think Steve Wonderboy Thompson would be a better fit for Zaleski because Zaleski. I merged his two names. Sorry about that. I think that's the fight to make moving forward. And moving right along in another welterweight bout, Nico Price defeated veteran Tim Means via stoppage. He knocked him out in the first round with seconds to spare. This to me was fight of the night. Uh, the fight that award actually went to the main event, which the main event wasn't a bad fight, but this one was simply better. Tim Means falling at the hands of Nico Price via a gorgeous counter right hand to the jaw. He crumpled over, he broke his ankle. Look up the picture if you dare. But Nico Price, he's coming off a bad knockout loss to Al Hassan after reeling off a highlight reel win over Randy Brown, and so kind of gotten he's coming off a minor setback, and he's right back in the win column here. He's a very exciting fighter. He's a really good record, and he's also not ranked too, so you can see him in the top 15. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward who he will get. I'm not even sure really who he should get at this point because I still think he's moving. He's being progressed correctly. You never want to rush these young guys into fighting. Fighters. You don't want to rush into a fight with Robbie Lawler. You don't want to rush him into a fight with, Ben Askren, stuff like that before they're ready. But you also want to test them. If they're clearly better than the level they're fighting at, you need to test them. So it'll be curious to see. I'll be curious to see, is what I meant to say, who he should get. Um, Maybe Vicente Luque. I think he beat him though. Or has he fought Vicente Luque? I could be wrong on that. So, but yeah, Nico Price once again getting right back on track. And now moving right along, another heavyweight bout is on the card. It featured Blagoy Ivanov, the former WSOF heavyweight champion, welcoming back the vet Big Ben Rothwell, who served a 2-year suspension, I believe, for a banned substance. Blagoy Ivanov won a unanimous decision, which was mildly controversial because many people, including myself, thought Ben Rothwell won. But at the same time, as I was watching the fight, it looked like Ben's strategy of moving forward and trying to just paw at Blagoy and trying to catch him slipping. It was kind of backfiring from the sense of Blagoy was actually getting off his counter punches. So I think that's what the judges saw. I mean, if I had to rationalize it, I felt the aggression that Ben was putting on and the damage he did won him that fight. But so that'll be interesting moving. That'll be interesting now. What will happen to Blagoy Ivanov, because this is his first UFC win in his second fight, his first being the debut against Junior Dos Santos of all people, and he actually had some success in that fight against Junior. So it's clear that Blagoy belongs here in the UFC. So we'll see who he gets matched up against. As I look at the rankings, I think the next person up that I think would make a lot of sense for him is Justin Willis. Justin Willis is also on a winning streak, and he's trying to make his claim to be in the top five and possibly get a title shot. I think that fight should be next, so that would be cool. And moving right along, we're going to a lightweight bout this time with Beneil Dariush defeating Drew Dober via submission and triangle armbar. This fight was really solid too. Drew Dober took control of the fight early in the first round. His boxing was just picking apart Dariush early, but Dariush, showing his wiles, recovered, and then the second round used his grappling to change the tone of the fight, and he was able to get the submission. So glad to see Beneil Dariush get back in the win column. I think people have kind of forgotten just exactly how good he is. He showed up to the UFC undefeated and was, a really I don't know if he was highly touted, but he was a really solid prospect. He lost a few fights here and there, but he was right on track to possibly be a top 10, top 5 guy. And then he would, then he got a setback against Michael Chiesa, and then from then on, kind of traded wins and losses. He got finished by Edson Barbosa, things like that. So it's good to see him back on the winning track. And Drew Dober, I mean, he's impressive. Continue to, he's really good too. And that's the thing; these guys aren't ranked. Well, at least like Dober. Dober wasn't ranked, and that's how much of a shark infested tank the lightweight division is. Um, that was yeah, it was a really good fight. It was actually one of the sleeper fights at the card, from the perspective of you look up and down, you're just like, okay, that's cool. And then there's Beneil Dariush and Drew Dober, and now to the final fight on the main card. I mean, which is the opening bout. The vet Tim Bosch lost to Omari Akhmedov via unanimous decision. This is kind of a wash. It was an okay fight. Um, Tim Bosch got his nose broken in it, unfortunately. He's getting a little long in the tooth, and you know, I don't think he should hang it up, but it's just one of those things where it's like, he's just getting older, and his competition is getting either younger or stronger or more, you know, athletically developed. So, but it is still, it's tough to see him there, getting busted up by a guy that he probably would have beaten maybe a year or two ago, maybe even as recently as a year or two ago. So it'll be interesting moving forward to see where that goes for his career. As for Akhmedov, I don't really know where he places in the middleweight division right now. I don't see him as a contender, but he is a very talented prospect. So how he gets booked moving forward, I don't really have a matchup for him right now off the top of my head. So that that's I just think this was just a transitional fight, which also leads me to say this card. Now let's just talk about the card in general. I thought the card was a solid B minus, maybe a C plus, because of its regional tone. A lot of fighters not a lot of people are heard of, and guys that are still kind of starting their UFC careers. A lot of decisions on this fight. There were a couple of few highlights and finishes, but again, it's prospects mostly, and I think that's just like what I talked about with UFC 235. This is another one of those cards that helps move divisions along, and I feel that's always necessary to help process things, to help us understand how the picture is going to shake out in the UFC among the title in the title races. So, but yeah, overall, I thought it was a solid offering from the UFC, and the next one is going to be UFC London, so that one's going to be fun too. That main event is Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal. So thanks for tuning in again. Appreciate all you that watch and listen. And until next time, I'm out.